So here's what went down. One day after work, I came home and noticed a car parked in my driveway that I'd never seen before. Not only was it unfamiliar, but it was parked so crookedly that there was no way I could get my car into the garage. I tried giving the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was someone my wife knew, but when I asked her, she had no idea who it belonged to either. We checked the Ring doorbell footage, and sure enough, it was Karen, the same neighbor my wife had heard about through Facebook drama. Classic Karen type, middle-aged, blonde highlights, oversized sunglasses. You know the look. I figured I'd just ask her nicely to move her car next time she came back. And when she finally did return, I walked out, placed my hand on the hood, not aggressively, just to make eye contact, and politely told her that this wasn't her driveway and that I'd appreciate it if she didn't park here again. She didn't even roll down her window. Just gave me a smug little scoff, backed out, and sped off like nothing happened. We laughed it off inside, because honestly, meeting a Karen is like going to the zoo. Fun to watch, but you wouldn't want to be locked in with one. Well, guess what? The next day, her car was back in our driveway. Again. Parked just as badly. At that point, I was half convinced I was hallucinating. I wrote her a note reminding her it was private property and slid it under her windshield wiper. Watched from inside for a bit, took pictures, and made sure I had evidence, because let's be real, watching all those Karen videos online had taught me something. The note worked sort of. There was peace for 2 days. Then, come Saturday, I pulled up and saw her car once more. That same sad attempt at parking blocked my garage again. Enough was enough. I sat on the porch for over an hour waiting for her to show up, took more pictures, double-checked every rule I could find, and confirmed that I was 100% within my rights to take action. When she finally came back, she gave me some weird looks as I approached. I told her plainly, if she parked here again, there would be consequences, no excuses. But instead of listening, she started spouting off about how this is a neighborhood and tried claiming the driveway was public property. She said she just needed a few minutes and that I should chill out. Not happening. To prove I was serious, I pulled out my phone and called a local towing company right in front of her. They said they could be there in an hour. At first, she looked like she didn't believe me, but once I hung up, I saw the panic hit her eyes. Out of nowhere, she started screaming like I was attacking her or something. I immediately started recording for my own protection and told her to calm down. I even offered her a way out, leave now, and the tow truck wouldn't come. But no, she chose chaos. Instead of leaving, she kept shrieking, calling me a harasser, and saying I needed to be stopped. Honestly, at that point, I kind of felt like I was in one of those viral videos you see online, where a grown adult completely loses it over something so small. I'd seen staged versions of this before, but I never thought I'd witness someone with no apparent issues just flip out like it was nothing. It honestly seemed like this was her go-to move. Throw a fit until people cave and let her have her way. And that's exactly why I felt even more satisfied watching her get upset when I refused to back down. When she realized I wasn't going to cancel the tow truck, she pulled out her phone and called the police on me. She walked a few steps away like I wouldn't notice, but I could hear every word. She told them I was harassing her, threatening her. It was surreal listening to her twist the whole situation while I stood there trying to stay calm. For a moment, I actually got nervous. These were real cops and they were on their way. But then I reminded myself I hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, I had pictures, footage from the Ring camera, and a clear story to tell. She had absolutely nothing except a fake meltdown. She didn't respond to what I said, just tried to cry as hard as she could before the cops arrived. I don't think for a second it was real. A few minutes later, a patrol car pulled up and 2 officers stepped out. Karen immediately started firing off accusations, telling them how dangerous I was and how they needed to take me in before things got worse. Luckily, the officers asked to hear my side first. I explained everything, how many times she'd parked there illegally, how I gave her warnings, and how I had proof. I showed them the photos, the video footage, and explained that she was trespassing without any sign of stopping. Karen kept trying to throw in little comments about being attacked, but the cops weren't buying it. They could watch the footage themselves and see how dramatic her reaction had been. Slowly but surely, her act started to fall apart. One of the officers went over and calmly told her that if this happened again, she would be arrested for trespassing, and that her call to the police was completely unwarranted. She looked at me, then at the cop, and without warning she spat right in his face. I literally had to cover my mouth in shock. The two officers reacted instantly. They grabbed her, pushed her up against her car, and cuffed her hands behind her back. Everything happened so fast it felt like a movie scene. They told her clearly that she was under arrest for disorderly conduct and assaulting an officer. She didn't physically fight back, but her crying suddenly got so loud it sounded like she was being dragged into a horror movie. They put her in the squad car, made sure I and my wife were okay, apologized for her behavior, and drove off. I stood there stunned. That really just happened. But as it turns out, that wasn't even the end of it. There was still more to come for Karen. Did she really think she could just spit on a cop and walk away? Well, not exactly. A little while later, we got an update. The police contacted us again to confirm that she had been formally charged, not just for trespassing, but for assault on an officer. Her car was towed away, and apparently, she was making a lot of noise at the station, claiming she was the victim. But this time, the evidence was solid. No amount of crying or screaming was going to help her now. Watching the tow truck finally pull her crookedly parked car away felt like the last piece falling into place. Standing there with my wife on our porch, we just stared at each other for a moment. We had gone from dealing with a nuisance neighbor to witnessing a full-on arrest, all because of a driveway. It was one of those moments where you realize life can surprise you in the most unexpected ways. And in the end, it was a reminder. Sometimes, standing your ground, even when things get intense, is the only way to show people that respect goes both ways. Justice may have been served quickly, but real life, especially when cops and courts get involved, rarely ends with a neat little bow. A few days after the incident, I got a call from the police department asking me to come in and give a formal statement about everything that had happened, from the very first time Karen parked in our driveway, all the way up to the moment she spat in the officer's face. They also wanted copies of the pictures I'd taken and the Ring doorbell footage I had saved. It felt a bit surreal walking into the station and sitting across from a detective. I went through the whole story again, trying my best to remember exact dates, times, and what was said. He listened carefully, took notes, and confirmed the charges against Karen: trespassing, disorderly conduct, and the more serious one, assault on a police officer. He made it clear that spitting on an officer is no small thing. It's treated as a form of assault, and the department doesn't take it lightly. He thanked me for the evidence, especially pointing out how valuable the videos were. When I left the station, I felt okay, but also kind of uneasy. It was good knowing she was actually facing consequences, but at the same time, I was now officially tangled up in a criminal case. That's not something you really prepare for when you just want someone to stop parking in your driveway. We tried to get back to normal work, home, enjoying the house, but there was always this quiet tension lingering in the background. We heard through neighbors that Karen had already bailed out of jail pretty quickly, just like the officer had warned might happen. Her husband paid the bail, and we didn't see her anywhere near our house, which was a relief. At least she seemed scared off for now. But Karen wasn't going to let this go quietly. A week or so after the arrest, my wife noticed some posts popping up in the neighborhood Facebook group. Either Karen herself or someone posting on her behalf started talking about being targeted and mistreated over a simple misunderstanding. She played the victim hard, leaving out huge details like ignoring warnings, trespassing repeatedly, and, oh yeah, spitting on a cop. Some people online bought into the story and offered sympathy, while others who knew the real situation pushed back. Things got messy online for a bit. We decided not to engage directly. We just saved screenshots in case they were needed later. Arguing online wouldn't help the actual legal case. A few weeks later, the prosecutor's office called. An assistant district attorney, ADA, was handling Karen's case and wanted to meet. I headed downtown to her office, ready to do whatever I could to make sure the truth stayed at the center of everything. The assistant district attorney was all business, sharp, focused, and made it very clear from the start that she was taking the assault charge seriously. We went over my statement again, watched the ring footage, and she walked me through how the court process usually goes, plea deals, possible trial dates, and how I'd likely be called as a witness if things went that far. She also told me that Karen's lawyer was already trying to get the charges reduced, claiming it was just a moment of stress and not an intentional act. But the ADA wasn't having it. She said flatly, "Spitting on an officer isn't just gross. It's assault. It's a potential biohazard and a direct attack on someone doing their job. We prosecute these cases." Hearing that from her felt reassuring. It felt like the system actually understood how serious this was. She also mentioned that while Karen didn't have a major criminal record, which might influence sentencing, assaulting an officer still meant real jail time was on the table. Even if it wasn't years behind bars, it was enough to make it clear that her actions had consequences. Now, to keep things interesting, let's fast forward a bit in the story. There was a court hearing, and trust me, Karen did not handle it well. In court, she tried pulling out every angle she could. She cried, claimed she felt threatened by me, which obviously contradicted the video evidence, and insisted that the spitting was an accident, an involuntary reaction because she was panicking. Her lawyer backed up the story, but honestly, it sounded weak from the start. The prosecutor, though? She completely dismantled Karen's version. She pointed out the inconsistencies, played clips from the footage showing how deliberate Karen's actions were, and reminded everyone that this wasn't some spontaneous panic attack. It was a calculated attempt to provoke a reaction. The jury didn't take long, maybe 2 hours at most. When they came back with the verdict, it hit like a wave. Guilty on all counts. Trespassing, disorderly conduct, and assault on a police officer. I felt a huge sense of relief wash over me. My wife grabbed my hand, and for a moment, it felt like we could finally breathe again. Karen, on the other hand, sat there frozen for a second, then started crying. This time, it almost looked like real tears. Almost. At the sentencing hearing, both the prosecutor and Karen's lawyer had their say. Her attorney asked for leniency, pointing to her otherwise clean record and trying to frame the situation as an unfortunate mistake rather than a pattern of bad behavior. Karen herself was allowed to speak, and she gave what was clearly a rehearsed, tearful apology. It sounded like she was reading from a script, more focused on how this whole thing had ruined her life than on taking real responsibility for what she'd done. The judge, however, didn't seem moved. He talked about the importance of respecting property rights and then zeroed in on the assault charge. He called spitting on a police officer a deplorable act and made it clear that attacking law enforcement would not be tolerated under any circumstances. Then came the sentence, several $1,000s in fines, 2 years of probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order that barred her from contacting us or coming anywhere near our property. But the part that really hit home, 60 days in county jail. It wasn't years behind bars, but for someone like Karen, who always acted like the rules didn't apply to her, it was huge. Real jail time. And they took her into custody right there in the courtroom. Hearing her cry as the bailiff led her away was unsettling. It always is when you see someone break down like that. But at the same time, it felt like justice had finally been served. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt like a real ending. The stress we'd been carrying for weeks, no, months, just lifted. We went home, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt peaceful again. Like it was finally ours without any lingering tension. It's been over a year now. From what we've heard, Karen did her 60 days. The neighborhood gossip mill still buzzes every now and then, but things have mostly quieted down. She finished her probation requirements, paid the fines, and as far as we know, she and her husband still live nearby. She and her husband still live in the area, but Karen keeps a very low profile these days. The restraining order is still in place, and thankfully, she hasn't caused us any more trouble. Looking back on everything, it was honestly a nightmare, dealing with the stress, the waiting, the court dates, the emotional toll. But in the end, standing firm, documenting everything, and seeing it through the legal system was the right decision. We didn't let her bully us. We trusted the process, told the truth, and eventually, accountability happened. And seeing her face real consequences, especially jail time for assaulting that officer, brought the kind of closure we really needed. Now onto another story, one that takes a completely different turn. So here's the setup. Am I the A**hole for telling my neighbor something she probably didn't want to hear? I'm a 33-year-old woman who became friendly with Emily*, a neighbor of mine. We bonded after I helped her move some boxes into our building while her husband, let's call him Matt, was in the hospital. I didn't meet him until a few weeks later, when she invited me over for dinner as a thank you. When I arrived, Emily mentioned he'd run out to grab wine. When he came back, I was shocked. I recognized him immediately. He was someone I'd gone on 3 dates with about a year earlier, before he suddenly ghosted me. And from his reaction, he knew exactly who I was too, but he played it off like we'd never met. I don't go in for games like that, so I cut straight to the point. I asked how long they'd been married, and Emily said 3 years. She noticed the tension and asked if we knew each other. He said no. I said yes and told her that we had dated about a year ago. That's when things got awkward fast. Emily was clearly upset and asked me to leave, which I did. The next day, she messaged me again, this time saying she didn't appreciate me lying about when I dated her husband. According to Matt, we had dated 4 years ago, which would have been before they were married, but still during their engagement. Either way, that would have meant he cheated. And not only that, but I wasn't even living in the city 4 years ago. To prove what I was saying was true, I sent her screenshots of our texts from the year before, along with a screenshot of his Bumble profile, which was still active. She never responded after that. And when I saw her in the lobby the other day, she wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I don't know if they're still together. She hasn't replied to anything since. So am I the A**hole? Let me know in the comments, do you think OP is the bad guy here or not? One commenter put it well, you told her the info she needed to hear. Now just let the pieces fall where they will. Don't engage any further. Antie, you were being honest. But maybe it's best to give her space now. Mini update, Emily actually stopped by the other day. We had a quick chat, and she let me know that she kicked Matt out, and she thanked me for telling the truth. She also found out I wasn't the only person he had been seeing while they were married. I'm giving her space now, but I wanted to share that update. Final update. For now, over the last few days, I've been hanging out with Emily, along with her sister and 2 best friends who flew in to support her. On Tuesday night, she texted me, space is overrated. Wine? And that was that. Turns out, Matt confessed to everything and more. It was worse than anyone expected. But this isn't about him anymore. We've had some good, sometimes difficult conversations, but overall, it's been cathartic and surprisingly positive. I've found myself surrounded by some pretty amazing women, and I think that's why this whole situation turned out the way it did.